The Duelist role has some huge fundamental problems, and it doesn't look like they will be fixed anytime soon. But what exactly is wrong with the Duelist role? Well, historically, towards the beginning of Valorant, we would have double Duelist compositions, but as time moved on, slowly but surely, we've eliminated the second Duelist to most compositions having an average of one Duelist, and some compositions not even running a Duelist at all. This wouldn't be that big of a deal, but there's also 7 Duelists on the roster, but only 2 Duelists, Jett and Raze, are seeing consistent play in the meta. The other Duelists simply don't do what these 2 characters do, and they never find a spot in the meta, and new characters keep coming out, new Duelists keep coming out, but they don't replace Jett or Raze in a meta. They primarily become ranked or pub stompers, not actual meta or pro play. But why only Jett and Raze? What is it about these 2 Duelists that separate them from the rest of the roster and make it so that if new Duelists don't emulate the things that Jett and Raze can do, they will fall into a category of character that just, once again, doesn't see meta or pro play at all? Now, before we get into it, I just wanted to mention that SkillCapped has been filling out our site with some of the best courses in the game right now, designed to take your Duelist play from 0 to 100 just in a month, guaranteed or your money back. Check this out. We recently published courses for Jett, Reyna, Raze, and ISO that all break down how the top players in the game use these agents to dominate in ranked. We showcase all of the hidden tech that lets these players drop nearly 30 kills in a match in Radiant lobbies, and the best part is it's not even that hard to replicate. Most people believe you need crazy aim to carry on Duelist, but the truth is anyone can do it, and we'll show you how. So be sure to use the link in the description for a discount, and other than that, let's get back in the video. So basically, generally, the thing that a Jett or a Raze does, or a Duelist does in pro play, is create space, which is a pretty loose term, but essentially what you're doing is you're forcing area on the map that your team can contest and control. If we think about any areas that enemies are holding, that's space that they control. They have line of sight, they have information, and they often occupy that area with their physical bodies. But Duelists operate so quickly, especially Jett and Raze specifically, they push into the space, gather information about where enemies are, put a body in a position that can clear certain corners and cubbies that you wouldn't be able to do very quickly without pushing someone there, and this ultimately creates space for your team or room for them to push in, not have to clear each and every angle as they walk through an area, and this is what Jett and Raze specifically do. And this is a little bit of an oversimplification, but my point is that these characters create that space when other Duelists don't do that at all, or they do it to such a minimal amount in comparison. And basically what this really comes down to is mobility, and it's the way that both Jett and Raze make space. Jett will smoke and dash onto point, Raze will often double satchel onto a space or an area, and this will create that quote-unquote space for their team, and it's because they do this so quickly that they can create that space for their team. But a lot of characters don't do this in the Duelist category. Characters like ISO and Reyna, when they get introduced to the category, yes, they can hold areas, and yes, they can shoot things, but they can't create space with their abilities in the same way that Jett and Raze can. And ISO's barrier that stops bullets still doesn't fulfill that job in the same way because it's not physically putting him there fast enough for him to create that space in a way that can't be filled. Think of it like a bubble where when a character pierces through it, they create a vacuum that takes a while for it to fill in. It's like a giant indentation in the bubble that will slowly fill in over time, but you want that to be made very quickly. It's like, you know, pressing down on a mattress really fast and then picking up your hand and the memory foam mattress like slowly fills up. You want that to be fast. If you do it too slow, the resistance can happen naturally and it will basically stop you. So it needs to be something that happens very quick, and only Jett and Raze can really fulfill that, with the exception of one other character that we'll talk about in a bit. Now this really begs the question, is this fine? Is it okay if that we will forever remain in a one Duelist meta where only Jett or Raze see play and all the new Duelists that get introduced just plop in a pile with other Duelists that don't see meta or pro play? I don't necessarily think that that pushes the bounds of the type of characters that we'll see in meta play, especially when we've seen a lot of changes between a lot of the Sentinels, the Initiators, and the Controllers, but the Duelists have basically been stuck here for a while, and it doesn't look like they're going to change anytime soon. So the question is, do more Duelists need to be made like Jett or Raze with that high level or mobility? This is one way that you could fix this problem, by creating characters that have that same ability ability, that same strength, that same capability of creating that space, but then maybe other abilities around that character so that they're different, but they still do that thing that is essential basically for a duelist to have. It's becoming like that thing is absolutely necessary, and if they can't do that, they can't really be a meta duelist, so maybe they should be more akin to Jett or Raze. Or perhaps the game and Jett and Raze themselves need to be fundamentally changed and other heroes balanced around that. Maybe you weaken the mobility of characters like Jett and Raze, and then you reduce the power of Sentinels, and then overall you balance the game around it so that maybe just being there and engaging slower but still pushing through and creating space much slower than Jett or Raze does is fine, because the other characters and abilities around the game are weaker. I don't really think that that's the best tactic because it would require like a huge rebalance of the game, but it is a route you could go if you wanted to. So this really leads us to the problem. We have a very stagnant duelist meta that doesn't look like new duelists will interrupt. How do you fix this? How do you fix duelists fundamentally? And I think it's really three core things that you could do. Number one is you could homogenize, which is what I talked about. You allow next generation duelists, all the next generation duelists, to have some form of mobility, right? Similar to Jett or Raze, they don't have to operate in the same way, but generally the idea is that they can get from one place to another rather quickly in a pretty linear way, right? You have some means to get onto site, force yourself there, and basically put yourself in a location that allows you to fight, and it needs to be fast. Like, the faster it can happen, the better. If it happens a bit too slow, like we'll talk about Neon in a second, but even Neon's slide and run is actually a bit too slow to fulfill this. You actually need it even faster than that. But I don't necessarily know if this is the best route for duelists because it kind of locks them in to doing this one specific thing. But you got to understand that if you wanted to make characters that don't do this in the duelist role strong enough to exist in the meta, specifically the pro meta, and I'm talking about like characters like Reyna, for instance, or ISO, you would have to make these characters so busted that they would take over ranked play completely, because these characters are already dominant as ranked ladders and pub stompers and smurf characters. So you wouldn't want to just create these characters to be super stacked. You would want to introduce characters that have the pro thing that is needed strong, but not necessarily the rest of their kit overtuned. Now I once again bring up the massive rebalancing solution, and I just don't really think that this is a great solution because you are going to change the entire game around duelists. I do think that there could be room to potentially rework some of the duelists that are fitting into this ranked only situation where they're really good in ranked and they're not good in much other places. I think that you could probably change some of their abilities just a little bit, maybe even one ability, to make it more mobility focused. That could be a solution to your problem without rebalancing the whole game. But the third way is more creative solutions. And the best case of this that I've actually seen about a creative solution is actually Clove, and it's specifically abilities after death. And I know that this is going to be a slippery slope because I think that this has the potential to be completely overpowered, but the thing that's important about a duelist dashing on or double satcheling on to create space is that they have a high chance of actually living because they do it so fast. And when we talk about characters like Neon and other characters, because they will get onto site so much slower, there's a higher chance of them dying, and they're not going to be able to cross through the line of sight of anyone without getting shot at in a way a Jett dash would or a double satchel would, and these characters could actually live, right? But what if you introduced a lot more abilities after death to certain characters that allowed them to still get value even if they did die? So in the case that they don't get to site very quickly, they could still be useful, but at the very least they could try, they could take a 50-50 with an angle. If they die, they're still not useless, right? And it's really interesting because you have to kind of choose what the value they get, right? What are the abilities after death? I think they could pretty much range from completely inconsequential to super busted, right? Flashing after death, stuff like that would just be completely absurd. But, you know, just doing some really small thing like some Molly or something might not really matter as much, but it could matter. It kind of depends on how it's implemented. But this is just one example of like a creative solution that you could apply to duelists that could make them good even in a situation where they don't have a means to take space or area quickly. And I think that's kind of the thing that you need to solve. I did want to briefly talk about Neon because I think Neon is a perfect example of a character that almost threads an interesting creative balance between being able to take space quickly but also being very unique and pushing the bounds of what a duelist can be. The problem is almost all of Neon's kit just allows them to get to a place, right? They use the wall, they use the slide, slide, they use the stun. All of these oftentimes need to be used in unison to even get to the place they want to get to and live, right? Sometimes you'll get a kill, but oftentimes you're going to stun regardless if there's someone there or not. You're going to wall just to deny line of sight. So you're using your entire kit to do something that like a smoke and a dash could do better and actually create even more opportunities for your team, with wall being very, very easy to mess up your team's engagement. So I do think that there are pieces of the duelist role that do work, but we haven't really seen all the pieces come together in a way that I'm almost afraid that all the future duelists from here on out are just going to be just inferior to Jett and Raze. And I don't necessarily think that's interesting or going to be fun for the foreseeable future, but I want to hear your take on it. Do you think I hit the mark here, or do you think there's something that I'm missing? Definitely let us know in the comments down below and give us your suggestions for how they should change the duelist role or how they should introduce new duelist characters with what abilities. Let us know down below. And before we wrap this up, let me tell you a little bit more about SkillCapped. So we offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, and that's a pretty crazy thing to offer. It's like a gym membership guaranteeing you'll get ripped. Your local gym would go bust if they offered that. Not us. We've offered this for years because our service really works. It works so well, in fact, that we're able to produce by far the largest catalog of premium Valorant guides on the internet. We add new courses every month with over 1,000 guides curated into 50 courses no one can compare. We also have a direct line of communication with subscribers in our Discord so that you can get connected immediately to some of the best players in the game who will respond to any and all questions asked. Sign up today for as little as $6.99 a month if you are serious about improving. So that's gonna be all for this one today. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.